Really excited to be here this morning and working with your young people, and we're going to work through your first class here, and we're kind of in the middle process of doing that, and we got a few exhibitors we're going to release out of here that have brought some hogs that have some quality. They don't put together quite the things we're after this morning, but they've still done a good job with their projects and getting them presented. Please help me in starting our day this morning with a round of applause on our Class 1s, and we'll keep working through these kiddos this morning. Thank you.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure to be here this morning, and we started off here in the Berkshire ring in a good class and lots of parts and pieces here, and The one that I kept coming back to in terms of his balance, his reach and go, his stoutness when you get up on top of him. He's really big in terms of his chest, still maintains a really good look out through that front end, and he's really fresh down his top. The young man here closest to us, closest to me, is going to have our class winner and champion. I think a real nice bear that covers all the basics and yet has lots and lots of extras. The bear here in second is another one you like. Really tall fronted, extra good about his look up through his front end, really stout in terms of his center body. He's got a great big burly back in him, and yet at the same time, very good in terms of his coordination. I didn't see him as being quite as genuine in terms of his base width as he comes right directly at me at the bottom of his skeleton as what we had in the one up above, but a very nice bear there in second to be reserved. The bear that comes in third, love the look this one's got out through his front end. He gets just a little more refined in terms of his makeup. He gets a little refined there in terms of his forearm. I need to bust him open as he comes directly at me at the base of his chest, spread those front feet just a little wider, make him go to the ground stouter in relationship to the two that we had up above. Really a big back, thick-ended bear that comes next, and another one you like in terms of design. I need to loosen him up in his hip and rear leg, make him go just a little square there out of those hocks and out of his hip as we compare him to the ones we had up above. Next one that comes out, really tall fronted, stout bear that's got a great big forearm. Love those things about him. He's got a big rear leg. I didn't see him as being quite as fresh down his top. I didn't see him as being quite as extended and neat out through that head and neck as what we had up above. Next one that comes out, another stout mugged, really big back bear that comes out. He too gets just a little staler in terms of his appearance, gets a little rounder in terms of his hip compared to the ones we had up above. Gilt that comes out next, another one you like the design from the side profile. Tall fronted, extra good in terms of her look. Need to bust her open in terms of her center body. Stouten her there as she comes directly at us. As we work on down through here, we've got one that gets just a little rounder and shorter and quicker in terms of his maturity. You got another one that comes out that gets just a little more uncoordinated off those rear two. On down through there, just some structural issues we'd like to change. Good class to start today. Let's give all our Berkshire enthusiasts a nice round of applause.
Check. Nice first class here in terms of our winner, bear that resembles some quality in terms of his look from the side. He's neat in terms of his proportionality, but his condition looks proper for this stage of the game, and still yet he reads with some extension. I think one that's comfortable in terms of his skeleton and opens up appropriately in the top side of his body and his blade. I think he's just the most appropriate in terms of being a balanced show bearer to go ahead and lead off in this particular class. The one that's going to be second is one that reads quicker to me in maturity. She's big in her features and in the shape of her face and her chest and her broadness. I'd like to see her just a little more elevated all throughout, and that starts at the ground up front. But you talk about a really big, bold, stout, big forearmed one that's comfortable and loose built. That's where we need to be. The one that comes next to us is one that, even though doesn't get out and go perfect out of his hip and hind leg and has a little gland, that's an appropriate bear in terms of being shapely, muscular, bold, big forearm. I think a really nice kind of a bear that we just like to improve ever so slightly in a couple of them areas. I think a breeding piece here for this young man. Big featured, big forearmed, little rigid built, but I think one that's muscular and good looking. The bear that comes to us next here is one that isn't quite as big forearmed and strong there at his front foot, but really a comfortable, big backed, really big foreloin market hog that's big pinned, and I like that a lot. I think as you get into some of these others, they too have some quality about them. They're at a weight where maybe they aren't as advanced, or they're a little too far past where they need to be relative to their maturity, but they're hogs that are opened up. They're stout in their features, and they're heavy duty in their look. Let's give these kiddos a hand, please, in our first class here. Thank you.
Results out of your first class and only class of Berkshire Market Hogs. First goes to Braden Lancaster, Kentucky. Second goes to Maria Frosch, Indiana. Third goes to Wyatt Collard, Missouri. Fourth, Peyton Jones, Indiana. And fifth, Royston Pruitt, Indiana. Your champion Berkshire, Braden Lancaster, Kentucky Reserve, Maria Frosch, Indiana. We're now showing Class 1 Chesters. Results out of your first class of Crossbred Market Hogs. From Arkansas, Millie Kate Foster wins the class. Second, Emil Lyons. Third, Talon Folks. Fourth, Thomas Pontius. And fifth, Talon Folks. We are now showing Class 2 Crossbreds. Please put your hands together for the exhibitors exiting Ring A.
Check. Please help me in giving these kiddos that go back here in our Class 2 a round of applause, please, on doing a good job. Thank you.
Very good set here in our Chester ring, and I think the one that comes to the top and does so in terms of balance and design, look, and yet still opens up. Big fresh top when you get up on top of him. Ultra square coming and going. The young lady there in the black's going to have our champion here today. I think a very nice place to start in this class. Like the extra boldness that the young lady's bearer in second's got. He is just a little steeper in terms of his hip. Not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to set his front pasterns and come directly at you. Gets just a little more jammed up front in relationship to our champion, but there's two awful nice Chester bearers here at the top of the class. Young lady's bear that comes in third. I like this one in terms of his elevation, good in terms of his look. He gets a little shorter in terms of his step up front, gets a little rounder in terms of his hip, not quite as coordinated in terms of his step and go out here in comparison to the two that we had up above. The next gilt that comes out, big back and really good in terms of shape when you get up on top. A little more timid, not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to hinge and go off her rear pasterns, not quite as coordinated and square when you get directly behind. Big back bear that comes out next, gets a little more higher there in terms of his pole, not quite as good in terms of his freshness in relationship to a couple of the other ones. I need to square him just a bit more as you view that one going directly away. Gilt, it's a big heavy bone stout gilt when you get up on top of her. Gets drier in terms of her center, doesn't balance quite as well, doesn't want to hinge and go and reach and plant and drive quite as well off her rear two out here in comparison to some of the others. Another bear that comes out like this one in terms of shape, doesn't balance quite as well, gets a little more refined in terms of his foot size and his bone. Next one that comes out gets a little crustier there at the top of his neck, not quite as fresh in terms of his overall appearance out here, not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to handle his rear two. We round the class out with a couple that just don't balance quite as well in terms of their look from the side and not quite as much as they come and go as we study them out here on the shavings today. Good class. Once again, let's congratulate all those Chester kids.
A reminder, exhibitors, make sure you have the right back tag number on, especially if you are going to the scales and that back tag number that you have on does not match the pig you are driving. There could be some confusion. So please make sure you have the right back tag number on when you come into the ring that matches the pig that you are driving. It's very important. Results out of our one class of Chester Market Hogs. Congratulations, Camry Evans from Arkansas for being your champion. Second, in reserve, Kinley Hill, Indiana. Third, Carson Kokenauer, Indiana. Fourth, Kane Falkenberry, Arkansas. And fifth, Ashley Hagan, California. We are now showing Class 1 Durocs. Class 1 Durocs. This is your last and final call to the makeup area.
It's a good class of bears, and as we work through there, we had a couple kiddos go ahead and get themselves out and weigh themselves, and that's okay. But as we did that, I just wanted to go back through there and make sure we get this thing set right and how I see them and how those kiddos lined up in 8, 9, and 10. And with that, we kept a few more this time, but I make no apology for that. I just want you guys to know kind of what happened there. We just had a few that went ahead and weighed themselves, but as it is, we get out here and there's a really nice show bearer to win this class, and that's the one close to us here. The young lady's driving. Really a comfortable, loose-structured, pretty bold type of bearer in terms of just his broadness out of his shoulder and his spread and his rump width. I think a bearer that maybe is a little more wedgy that way in terms of being bigger-ended than he is in his front, and probably not the boldest arm pig, but I think one that gets out here and puts a lot of quality and comfort together and more in line with where I want to be in regards to maturity at this weight. The one that's going to be second's the young man's black one, and real big forearmed and rugged built, square in his muscle pattern and bold bodied. One that's more rigid and upright in his shoulder and hind leg movement, but I think one that brings a lot of feature and quality to the ring. The one here in third is much like the one in second. Really heavy duty built, real square coming and going. I really like her comfort level. She to me is one that reads just coarser and quicker in terms of her maturity ahead of her shoulder. Maybe not as attractive up there on top of her blade and high out of her shoulder as those two in front of her, but I think really a brute, real stout gilt there. The one that comes next is one that's real bold-bodied and big-rumped and big-pinned and pretty comfortable. I think one that doesn't read as attractive up there in his front end about his poll and jaw, and a little bit more curvature and just quickness of cannon in terms of how I read him, but I think really a bold, big-centered market hog. I think one that's not as dressed up here in terms of being dark black and as neat fronted. That's a comfortable, heavy structured, really well designed market hog that just isn't quite as good in terms of his ring presence. This is one that just always wants to roach up and not set down in his back line. Great neck, huge foreloin, real big muscle. I think one that we just need to get to set down better there. I think one that's a little rigid behind moving and maybe not perfect in front foot, but stout featured, real bold, real big spread, real well presented black bear there. Not as much to this one, but I think well presented, good looking, really good headed. Please help me in giving these kiddos a round of applause out here in our class 2. Thank you.
Another good class here, and as we start our red ones, I think the one that comes to the top and does so in this class in terms of balance and freshness and look and build is the young man there in the center of the ring with the light-colored shirt on. One that you like in terms of this one's angle to his shoulder, the way this one hinges and goes off his rear too, extra good in terms of his stoutness and yet still really mobile and level in terms of his design. I think a nice place to start. Bigger, thicker-ended Barra comes in second. You like this Barra in terms of his stoutness. He gets just a little flatter in terms of his front pastern. Doesn't blend and fit together quite as nicely up through his head and neck as what we had in our class winner, and yet at the same time, very good in terms of the way this one stays together in terms of his proportions. He's square as he comes and goes. A nice Barra there to land in second. Barra that comes in third is longer in terms of his neck, in terms of his look up front is better there. At the same time, he gets just a little straighter in terms of his shoulder, a little easier in terms of his top, not quite as good in terms of his coordination off his rear too as what we had up above. Next Barra that comes out, tall extended Barra that you like. He gets a little frailer in terms of his makeup, not as good in terms of his length of hip, not as good in terms of his structure. Gets just a little more rigid in terms of his spine in comparison to the ones we had up above. Next Barra that comes out gets a little timid in terms of his front. He gets just a little easier there. Wants to kind of search and hunt where he wants to plant those. He gets just a little off there in terms of his spine. Not quite as good in terms of his levelness of hip as what we've got up above. Big stout Barra that comes out next doesn't have quite as much look out through his front end as what we had up above, but a Barra that's good in terms of his length of stride, the way that one hinges and goes off his rear leg, a nice Barra there. Next one that comes out gets a little plainer in terms of his makeup, a little quicker in terms of his maturity, a little crustier there at the top of his blade, not quite as lean and fresh down his top as what we had up above. Next one that comes out gets a little staler in terms of his makeup, really good in terms of his symmetry, off from the side, tall fronted Barra. Just need to open him up and stout him, give him just a shot more freshness today. Next one that comes out gets a little straighter in terms of his makeup, not quite as good off of either end. As we round the class out, we've got some that get just a little more structurally inept out here, not quite as good in terms of the way they're built, not quite as much power and mass as we get right into them.
Check. Please help me in giving these kiddos that are going to roll out a big round of applause here in our Class 3. Thank you.
Results out of Class 2 Crossbreds. First goes to Victoria Gossard, Ohio. Second, Landon Tinsman, Indiana. Third, Balin Hessel, Ohio. Fourth, Tanner Rose, Ohio. And fifth, Reagan Isler, Ohio. We're now showing Class 3 Crossbreds.
Young man over here to our right is going to win this class, and really the easy place to begin in terms of just being a rugged, comfortable, really good toed barrow that is big feature, but yet his feet stay good to the ground, and one that opens up with enough to his top side. He isn't the class leader, but he still represents a bold, stout, comfortable, athletic built market hog and wins this class pretty easy. For me, the difference in these two, one's just more genuinely manly in terms of chest and broadness of blade, and that's in the young lady's blue barrow. He's a little different to look at there in terms of his paint and that, but I think you get into that hog, and that's a big back, big rump, big pinned hog that's just more rigid up in his shoulder, not as good there at his forearm and knee set, and not quite as good there at his head, but I think one that's still really attractive from the side and one that has a great deal of muscle shape. The one there in third falls out as he comes at us and goes away, but I think that's a good-looking, well-presented, comfortable, moderately length barrow that's still got some extension and immaturity to his front end. The next one coming out is a big-tongued, really stout-featured, big-faced hog there that's really bold about his forearm. I think one that reads just not quite right behind in how he's constructed there at his hind leg, but I think one that, again, has got a great deal of foreloin shape and stoutness of feature. A hog here that comes with just more crest and maturity to the top side of his neck, real square built, real rectangular kind of a market hog, and everywhere you want to evaluate him can appreciate his kind. I think a barrow here that, although holds that ear and fights her as we come in, he's one that wants to drop more there at times in terms of where his tail sits and his rump goes and his hind leg, and doesn't just get out and put them things down and push them back past his rump and go. I think really a good front two-thirds in that barrow, even though he's fighting her in terms of his ear. Really a barrow here that's square, and he's tried to get all the good out of in terms of how they put him together. I think one that's opened up enough, just would like to see him just more in balance from the side. As you get into some of these others, they too still have some quality, some good market fundamentals to them, just don't quite put it together with that extra quality, but still very good quality kids out here having fun. Please give our Class 3 exhibitors a big round of applause. Thank you.
Results out of your just completed Class 1 Durocs. First goes to Braden Loudermilk, Indiana. Second goes to Casper Friddle, Indiana. Third, Billy Faith Fulcher, North Carolina. Fourth, Sydney Sturm, Ohio. And fifth, Cray Emmenheiser, Indiana. We are now showing Class 2 Durocs. Results out of your just completed Class 3 Crossbreds. First goes to Landon Schwartzentruber, Indiana. Second, Cashley Wade, Arkansas. Third, Adley Green, Georgia. Fourth, Brady Mooney, Arkansas. And fifth, Chris Ackerman, Ohio. We are now showing Class 4 Crossbreds. This is the last class in the first division.
lots of parts and pieces. And I guess at the top, I thought there was a little more give and take in this class than some of the others we've had today. And the one I keep coming back to in terms of one that's kind of my kind, I guess, so to speak. It's long fronted. It's good in terms of his look. Fresher and bigger in terms of his shape when you get up on top. He's maybe not quite as he gets just a little rounder, I guess, out of his hip maybe than the bear that we've got in second. And yet at the same time, I think he's more comfortable in terms of his angle to his shoulder. I think he's better in terms of the way that one hinges and reaches off his rear too. And he's certainly bolder at the base of his chest than the bear that we've got here in second. Like the balance the bear in second has, tall fronted, short bodied, all those terms you want to use. He's not as long in terms of his neck. He's not as good in terms of the base of his chest. He's not quite as fresh in terms of his shape when you get right up on top of him. But that's two nice bears. Like I said, lots of give and take in that particular class. Like the stoutness of this bear in 3 that comes really good in terms of power and center dimension. He's big bladed. As you can see out here, he's a little more timid and a little softer there in terms of his front feet. He doesn't want to get out here and go quite as well as what we had in the top 2. But there's a bear that you have to appreciate in terms of his angle to his hock, his length of hip, his stoutness in terms of his center body. Next bear that comes out, taller fronted bear, good in terms of his look up through his front end. He gets a little staler in terms of his top shape, gets a little more upright in terms of his shoulder, gets a little softer or plainer there in terms of his center body. Not quite as good as what we had up ahead. But there's another bear that's good that maybe when he was back at 12 o'clock might look just a little bit better out here. The red one that comes out next gets a little more upright in his shoulder. Not quite as good in terms of his balance off from the side. Still one that has lots and lots of natural product and shape to him. As you get the next one out, this one gets a little more jammed up front. Not quite as good in terms of the way this one comes out of the top of his blade into his neck. Not quite as good in terms of the way that one hinges and goes off his rear too. Next bear that comes out, took a while to get this one to go out here, and he kind of wanted to duck his head. When he gets his head up and gets out here and goes, nice bear that's good up through his front 2/3. I'd change him there the way he wants to handle and roll on those rear 2 out here on the surface today. Next bear that comes out, another one's bold in terms of his chest, shapely bear when you get up on top. Doesn't have the extras that we had in the ones up ahead of him. Next one that comes out gets a little more jammed up in terms of his head and his neck, a little smaller in terms of his stature, a little quicker in terms of his maturity. Next one that comes out, one that gets just a little crustier there, not quite as good in terms of his balance off from the side. Nice class, though. Let's congratulate all those exhibitors.
Results out of Class 2, Duroc. First goes to Cole Thomas, Indiana. Second, Maya Holderly, Indiana. Third, Cagney Utterback, Indiana. Fourth, Joseph Barb, Ohio. And fifth, Bryson Cooper, Indiana. We are now showing Class 3, Durocs. A reminder, Mr. Steve Mapes is here, the official photographer, backdrop photographer of the North American Swine Show. Please, if you would, all champions and reserves in their divisions and breeds need to get a photo at the backdrop with Mr. Mapes. If you would like a photo, even though if you are only a class winner, second, third, fourth, or even down the line, please go see Mr. Steve Mapes at the backdrop. Thank you.
Young man's bear is going to win this class, and one that just stays more balanced in terms of his look from the side for me and how his rump sits and how his rump's built, and one that is extremely exotic in terms of his muscle shape. Really a big wide-backed and even bigger pin bear that goes to the ground square and sturdy in terms of his hind leg. He doesn't maybe read just perfect right there, right behind his forearm into his forerib, but I think that's a very, very good bear. And same can be said for the one in second. Real high quality, really neat looking, shapely backed bear that's good in his rib. To me, he doesn't read quite as good in terms of how that rump's designed from the side, and his front feet read softer to me and his shoulders more forward. I think really a good bear that you got to get into and start picking on them too and where you want to sit. And I pick on a really nice show bear for that young lady that doesn't reach quite as far and quite as stout in his hind leg either as our class winner. The young lady's bear that comes out next is the most comfortable, probably the best four-ribbed of the initial three. He's also the smaller bladed and forearmed and muscular hog of that initial group that could use just more punch. For me, it's particularly in his muscle pattern and how he drapes there through his center stifle, but really like his mobility and his athletic kind. This is a stout featured, really boorish looking type of show bear up front. I like his forearm, his tail root. I like his dew claw size and width at the ground toe wise. That bear is also the one that's probably the flattest up in how he comes at you out of his shoulder into his body cavity, and he too could be cracked open a hair, but big, wide, stout featured kind of a hog there. As we get into some of these gilts in 5 and 6, they're similarly constructed. I mean, front 2/3 are wicked. I just need to see them longer rump, longer stepping, more comfortable there in their hind leg assembly. But I think as you just want to talk about picture perfect standing still, you can learn a lot from these two gilts. We just need to make them not quite so rigid. You get into some of these and they still have quality. They don't exude quite the uniqueness of some of these in this class. Young man comes in early with a good bear there that just needs more oomph behind to play with some of these others. Please help me in giving all these kids in this class a hand as we wrap up this division. Thank you.
Results out of Class 4, Crossbreds. First, Rhett Turner, Georgia. Second, Madeline Wilder, Arkansas. Third, Emil Lyons, Arkansas. Fourth, Annalise Harris, Arkansas. And fifth, Thomas Pontius, Ohio.
Check. Out here in our first division, I think we've got a nice group of bearers that come back out of our classes, and as they come back to us, there's one I was expecting and waiting for, and I think as you get them back out here, for me, it's not really a decision there. I think there's one that's just a really good market hog in terms of their skeleton and their balance, and still reading with a great deal of quality from the side, and for their maturity, I think they still read appropriate in regards to what they have in terms of rib shape and dimension and boldness. To me, there's one that's just really, really stout-legged and built right. I like this thin-belted one to be best. Congratulations.
Your champion lightweight market hog in the Crossbreds comes out of class number 3. Congratulations to Landon Schwartzentruber. That drops in Cashley Wade. Please put your hands together for the exhibitors exiting the ring.
We bring our second in, and that barrow is one that is very similar in terms of just being opened up and bold in terms of how he's built, and maybe his shoulder pitch and comfort level up front, as we discussed in class, isn't quite as good as where we want it to be, but you like what that bear brings to the ring in terms of market fundamentals. And that's what, as you study these, I think as you watch them come and go, to me there's one that's just truer and more genuine and more thorough in their wit as they come right at me and leave us with the most impressive view. To me, that's this one. He'll be second best. Congratulations.
Your reserve lightweight crossbred comes out of class number 4. Congratulations, Rhett Turner.
challenging class, and I apologize. I did take a little longer on this, and I guess they told me there was 21 in this class, and they all weighed the same, and so I kind of wanted to take my time. I didn't know if we would lose any on that weight deal, and so I end up weighing 5, and yet as we bring our top 5 back out here, I think the one that comes to the top for me in terms of balance, and he's kind of got a bad attitude. He's not wanting to drive quite the best, but when this one gets out and goes, he reaches and goes extremely well. He's tall fronted. He's stout in terms of his skull. He's good in terms of his at the top of his neck. He's good in terms of his shape. He's square built, and he's better in terms of his hind leg than the bear that we've got in second. The bear in second, love the front 2/3 of this one. This one has a great big forearm, a great big foot, extra good in terms of his look up through his front end. He's not quite as tall at the point of the shoulder. I need to coordinate him just a bit better to compete with that top one in relationship to this class to moving him on up. But there's 2 awful big, stout, dense bears there at the top. Like the athleticism that we've got in the bear in third. And this one, I guess, didn't really hit you as hard when he came out of the gate in terms of his stoutness and power. The longer he goes, he just keeps going and going and going. Hip and hind legs extremely good. I need to give him just a shot more foot size, a shot more bone in terms of his rear leg to compete with those top 2. But another nice balanced bear, really good in terms of his look, good in terms of his athleticism, just maybe not quite as stout as what we had in the top 2. Stouter bear does come in 4, and this one, you like the center body and the dimension this guy's got. Great big hip in this bear, and yet still handles his rear legs comfortably. I need to set him back in terms of his shoulder, set him back in terms of his forearm in comparison to the ones we had up above. Another nice, long, extended bear that's really packed full of muscle. Gets a little rounder in terms of his shape, not quite as coordinated, a little drier in terms of his center body than what we had up above. Next one that comes out, good balanced bear. Doesn't have the extras that we had up ahead. Not as big in terms of his hip, not as good in terms of his power or center dimension as what we had up above, but a good balanced bear that's good in terms of his look off from the side. Just kind of ran out of gas. Next one that comes out, gets a little more mature in terms of the top of his neck. Not quite as good in terms of the way this one wants to hinge and go, but there's another big stout one that's got lots of power. Next one that comes out, tall fronted, good looking bear, not quite as many extras, not as stout at the ground, not as coordinated off from behind. As we round the class out, with a couple that maybe aren't quite as good in terms of their overall dimension, not quite as good in terms of the way they want to come directly at you. Good class, challenging class all the way through. Let's congratulate all our Duroc exhibitors.
Results out of Class 3, Durocs. First goes to Banner A. Young, Texas. Second, Colton Kilmer, Indiana. Third, Brantley Platt, Indiana. Fourth, Cagney Utterback, Indiana. And fifth, Style Stouch, Indiana. We are now ready to show for champion Duroc Market Hog. Coming out of class number 1, congratulations, Braden Loudermilk, Indiana. Second in that class was Casper Friddle, also from Indiana. Out of class number 2, congratulations to Cole Thomas from Indiana. Second in that class was Maya Holderly from Indiana. Out of your just completed class number 3, congratulations to Banner Young, Texas. Second in that class was Colton Kilmer from Indiana. Please put your hands together for each of these exhibitors as they drive for champion Duroc.
If you would please put your hands together for our 3 class winners in our Duroc division. All 3 very good in terms of what they bring to the table. I think there's one out here, though, in terms of just being stout and yet still really good in terms of look. Reach and goes extremely good. Very comfortable from his nose all the way to his tail. Big in terms of his center body. Extra good in terms of his bone, his foot size. He balances and he matches. Young man out of that heavyweight class is going to be your champion.
Your champion, Duroc Market Hog, comes out of class number 3. Congratulations, Banner Young, Texas. That drops in Colton Kilmer for reserve honors.
We bring our second place out of that heavyweight class, and we talked about him just a few minutes ago in terms of love his front 2/3, big in terms of his forearm, extra good, maybe not quite as coordinated or as comfortable at his rear 2 as our champion. There's another one out here that I absolutely love in terms of his design, his build, his look, his freshness, extra good in terms of reach and go, and yet still very good in terms of his length of hip, length of rump, really good in terms of his the way this one comes directly at you. Young man out of this first class is going to be reserved.
We got a really big class we're working through over here on the Crossbred side, and we're going to release a bunch of these kiddos out of this class. Please give them as well a big round of applause as they go back. This will be a fun class to sort through.
Your reserve, Duroc Market Hog, comes out of class number 1. Congratulations, Braden Loudermilk.
young man's bear is going to win this class, and comfortable, really loose skeleton bear that's square in his angles and really bold about his forerib. He's really stout about his forearm, but yet still attractive in his head. I like that bear for this weight has a crest that's still laid down in him and just reads appropriately balanced in how he's put together from the side. The one that's going to be second is really an elegant, extended type of female that's got that real attractive front end. She too runs shallower there in her bottom line and isn't quite as loose built in terms of her hip and hind leg and mobility, but really a stout, broad, really good forerib gilt that's really attractive in terms of her look. The one that's in third is a little frailer behind, not as correct in his hawk shape. A great looking bear in his front 2/3, just wants to tuck and be a little more out and not quite right behind, but really an appropriately presented, very well shown show bear. The one here in fourth is very stout featured. She does run downhill a bit and is a little rounder rump, but that's a bold, well presented, stout, big featured one. This is one you'd like to crack open, coming and going and set his neck down in his crest, but that's a really attractive fronted bear in terms of his head carriage. He's long and strong in his back line and still got length of rump. I think a really good balanced show bear. This is one you'd like to just see a little neater in terms of how his head's put together at this stage. Just wants to dish a little, comes with less jawbone and more crest, but that's a really good shape bear. His boldness of body, his muscularity, his tone and leanness is where I'd like to be. A bear that isn't as presented quite as neat, not quite as hard-shaped and youthful in his muscle pattern and neck, but mobile, got some depth of body, one that she does an extremely good job driving. Please help me in congratulating all these exhibitors in this class on doing a good job, please. Thank you.
Please put your hands together for the exhibitors exiting the ring in Ring A. Results out of Class 5 Crossbreds. First goes to Isaac Tugg, Arkansas. Second goes to Mason Scarborough, Arkansas. Third goes to Jordan Kelly, Indiana. Fourth goes to Riley Whitaker, Indiana. And fifth goes to Carrie Head, Arkansas. We are now showing Class 6 Crossbreds.
Lots of different parts and pieces out here. And the one I kept coming back to that I think initially hit me really good in terms of the way this one's built. His look up front, he's fresh topped, he's big centered, he's long in terms of his hip. He's the most secure off his rear two out here that we've got out of our top 5. I think he's the best in terms of his build. I think he's the best in terms of his balance that we had out here. Love the freshness and the shape that this one in second's got. Ultra good in terms of his look up through his front end. He's bigger in terms of his forearm than our class winner, and at the same time, he's not as good in terms of the way that one hinges and goes. He gets shorter in terms of his stride. Like the silhouette that this one poses out here, just need to free him up, make him go just a bit better off those rear two with a longer stride to compete with that top one. Next one that comes out, like this one in terms of his width, when you get up on top of him, he gets more jammed up through his head and neck. He gets more rounder and shorter and steeper in terms of his hip, not quite as coordinated in terms of the way that one wants to reach and go. I'd lengthen his hip, give him the ability to get out and go and cover the surface a little better. Long fronted gilt that comes next, another one you like in terms of freshness and shape when you get up on top. She's got just a little more set there to her rear leg. I didn't see her as being quite as good in terms of being able to hold up on down the road. I think that one's good in terms of her look, not quite as good in terms of the way she wants to handle her rear two. Like a lot of things about the stoutness of this bear that comes out next. Love this one in terms of his forearm. He gets a little bigger in terms of his sheath, gets a little softer in terms of his spine, not quite as good there in the way that one wants to coordinate his rear two. Next one comes out really shapely bear, this long extended front. Need to stouten him at the ground, make that fit in terms of what he has, a mass up high. Next one comes out is stouter there at the ground at the same time. He's not as good in terms of his reach and go out here. He's not as good in terms of his comfort level on the surface here today. Next one that comes out, like to set this one back in terms of his shoulder just a bit, give him just a bit more extension. Next one that comes out, same thing. Tall fronted, good looking bear. Need to set him back in terms of his shoulder, give him more reach and go. Next one that comes out, one that's good in terms of his design off from the side. Not as big in terms of his forearm, not as big in terms of his center body. Just need to expand him from end to end. Good class all the way through. Let's congratulate those Class 1 Hampshire exhibitors.
Results out of our just completed Class 1 Hampshires. First, Allison Leggett, Indiana. Second, Banks Sterling, Indiana. Third, Braden Lancaster, Kentucky. Fourth, Dylan Whitaker, Indiana. And fifth, Jama Viger, Indiana. We are now showing Class 2 Hampshires. Your evaluator for your purebred market hogs is Mr. Brady Crone from Monrovia, Indiana. Brady is the owner and operator of Crone Farms with his family. He's married to his wife, Kara, and they have 2 sons, Grayson and Harris, and 1 daughter, Nora. Brady has judged in 23 states at the county, state, and national level. If you would, please put your hands together for Mr. Brady Crone in Ring A. Your official swine ring shot photographer is our friends at Next Level Imaging. You can find all their coverage online at www.nextlevel-image.com. So if you would like to check out the ring shots here at the North American, please go to www.nextlevel-image.com. Your evaluator in Ring B in your Crossbred show is Maverick Squires from Kingfisher, Oklahoma. He's married to his wife Mackenzie, and they have 2 boys, Bodie and Sterling. Maverick is a show feed specialist for Lindner Show Feed and a part owner in Rhett Maverick Show Pigs. His advice for getting through a long week at a show is balance fun and work, caffeine, and vitamin C. Please put your hands together for Maverick Squires from Kingfisher, Oklahoma.
It's a good class, and I think there's a lot of quality as you work down through the upper end of these, and the best class we've had from that standpoint, just in terms of top end, having 4 or 5 of them that look right. I think as you get them back out here, though, and you study maturities and rib shape and boldness and where you want to be in terms of comfort level and fitting together right in terms of balance. For me, there's the candidate that's just the best, and to me, that's the young lady's Barra here closest to me. That's the boldest body, biggest front four-armed and legged hog that still is hydrated and looks like he fits his weight. I particularly prefer his body shape and loin and just how he still is so super fresh backed. And I know we talk about freshness and we talk about a lot of those things, but that hog's loin and where his body is relative to these two and his crest and his maturity, I'm in. The one here in second is one that isn't quite as high out of the top of his shoulder. Excuse me, her. She's not as bold-bodied and as stout-featured, but really a hairy, attractive, muscular show gilt that she drives that's just not quite as bold. The one here in third is, to me, he reveals the most age of the initial 3. He also comes with just less good right there at his ham loin hookup. He's not quite as bold and quite as bloomy in terms of his backside and his fullness to his forerib as you get right into the center of him. But that is a big-toed, very, very square-built, square-constructed show barra that I'm sure has seen better days, but that's a good animal. The one that sits here in fourth is very good, too. I'd like to stouten him up there in terms of his head and his jaw, big pinned, real comfortable, one that's got a lot of good to him as well. Same can be said for a lot of these as we work down the line. They don't incorporate the unique extremes as some of those do on the upper end of the class, but you still have to appreciate the quality in this class all the way down through 10 and what these hogs bring and how these kiddos have done. Please help me in giving all of them a big round of applause on doing a good job.
Results out of Class 6, Crossbreds. First goes to Macy Duncan, Oklahoma. Second, Ava Lynn Cravey, Georgia. Third, Chloe Kemp, Oklahoma. Fourth, Noah Kirkpatrick, Arkansas. And fifth, Harley Mabry, Arkansas. We are now showing Class 7 Crossbreds.
Good class here, and the one that comes to the top does so in terms of boldness and power. Big in terms of his jaw, still good in terms of his look, extra good in terms of the way this one ties and fits together into his shoulder and out through his hip. He's the longest strided one of our top two, and yet still maintains really good look and balance and center body. I think a nice place to start. Like the elevation that this bear in two's got, he gets a little shorter in terms of his stride, gets just a little more wrinklier topped out here. Big, thick-ended bear that still has a really good look and balance to him. I think another really good bear here at the top. Like the stoutness and the look and the build that this bear in third has. Really good in terms of this one and through his head, out as he comes directly at you. He's big in terms of his shape when you get up on top. He's still very good in terms of his look and design. Maybe just a nickel past 12 o'clock in terms of his freshness. He needs to be freshened up there in his center body, just stout in there at the ground in comparison to how much mass he's got up high. But another really good built, really good bear there to be in third. The bear that comes here in fourth and does have more center body, and at the same time, he's shorter in terms of his hip. He's shorter in terms of his stride, the way that one wants to hinge and go. Gets just a little more uncoordinated there in comparison to our top three. Next one that comes out gets a little more refined in terms of his bone and his foot size. Still a good sound bear that's good in terms of his look up through his front end. Next bear that comes out is bolder and fresher in terms of his center body. He's heavier bone. At the same time, he gets more upright in terms of his shoulder. He gets more jammed up in terms of the way that one up through his head and neck, and more restricted there from behind. I need to loosen him up, lengthen him all the way through to make him compete with those couple right directly ahead of him. Next bear is longer and more extended, and at the same time, he wants to narrow up. When he comes at you, he gets more refined in terms of his foot size. He gets more refined in terms of his bone and his structure. Just need to stouten him at the ground. Next one that comes out, big stout bear, gets just a little more uncoordinated there. Not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to set into his shoulder. The next one that comes out, another one you like in terms of shape when you get up on top. Not quite as good in terms of the way she wants to open up, coming directly at you. Not quite as good in terms of her center body. Next one that comes out, another one that's big and stout in terms of his bone, his foot size. Gets a little softer in terms of his pastern, a little more easier there in terms of his top line. Good class once again. Let's congratulate all those Hampshire exhibitors.
Results out of your just completed Class 2 Hampshires. First goes to Ella Wilson, Oklahoma. Second, Cash Murphy, Indiana. Third, Jack Kraft, Indiana. Fourth, Clara Leach, Indiana. Fifth, Hardy Kraft, Indiana. We are now ready to show for champion Hampshire Barrow.
We're going to have a good class to work through, but before we continue on, please help me in giving these kids a big round of applause as they go back to the back again on doing a good job, please. Thank you.
Beating them all in class number 1, Hampshire's congratulations, Allison Liggett, Indiana. Second in that class was Bank Sterling, also from Indiana. Out of your just completed class number 2, capturing the blue ribbon, congratulations to Ella Wilson, Oklahoma. Second in that class was Cash Murphy from Indiana. Please put your hands together for each of these exhibitors as they drive for Champion Hampshire at the 2023 North American.
Good set of Hampshire bears here, and as we get them out here, I went ahead and had them drop the seconds out, and I think there's a pair of them that come to the top for me out here that probably need to stay together in terms of build and look and design. I think they're the best two in terms of the way they're put together, the way they handle their feet and legs. Young lady with the heavyweight is going to be your champion. Young man that's second in that heavyweight class is going to be reserved.
Your champion Hampshire Market Hog comes out of class number 2. Congratulations, Ella Wilson from Oklahoma. Your second in that class was reserved. Congratulations, Cash Murphy, Indiana.
It's a good class of bears, and to me, as you get to these. They're different in their type and kind. They have the most quality, though. They appear with the right kind of maturity for their weight, and I think as you get them together and you ask yourself where they're at relative to their maturity and where they're at in regards to being bold and stout and muscular for big show bearers, to me it gets simple in which one's more in line with where we need to be. And to me, that's the young man's bear to my right. That's the bigger forearmed, bolder chested, bolder bodied, more muscular backed market hog today. And not to take anything away from the young lady's bearer, because skeletal assembly, balance, and look, that pig's extremely good. He's not draped with as much muscle at this stage in terms of real hard shape and boldness right behind his forearm, but extremely good show bearer that kiddo brought, with not as much to him going away down low, but really big, comfortable legs. The one there in third's bold, big chested, good ribbed, his neck set, pitch to his shoulder, rump, hind legs not quite as in line with where I'd deem ideal, but I do like that that's a bold, opened up, muscular bearer that's presented well. Same can be said here. I mean, good market hog, big featured, comfortable, loose built. He's not as genuine in terms of how he comes at you there at the ground, not quite as sharp in his look and muscle, but I think a bearer that represents good livestock. This is one that's presented great, bold, love his muscularity. I want to see that bearer set down with more comfort and flex and athleticism to his hind leg, but shown extremely good. Got a great big foreloin working in him. Really a comfortable bearer here, really loose, and one that gets out and has the right kind of athleticism. I'd like to neaten him up in his look up front, harden his muscle, but really a correctly structured, good built one. This is one that's straighter in his shoulder, smaller in his arm and front leg, but got great muscle and hind leg. One that's opened up going away. As we get into some of these others, they too still have some good. I'd like to improve them structurally. They're big and they're stout market hogs. Please help me in congratulating those kids on doing a good job.
Results out of our just completed Class 7 Crossbreds. First goes to Carson Lynn, Georgia. Second, Brenna Dreyer, Illinois. Third, Madeline Wilder, Arkansas. Fourth, Lily Burring, Ohio. And fifth, Shelby Martin, Indiana. We are now showing Class 8 Crossbreds. This is the last class in the middleweight division. Please put your hands together for the exhibitors exiting the ring.
We're going to release a few of these again, and young man's got a bear over here that's chromed up, that's really close, just needs a little more behind, and there's a lot of these that are just kind of at that point in maturity. These kids have done a good job with them, though. Please help me in giving them a hand as they go back to the back, please.
Very competitive class of Herefords here, and then the two that I've got out here, I think sort themselves to the top in terms of design and structure, and yet still being fresh, having some shape when you get up on top of them, yet still maintaining squareness as they come and they go. The one that I think is just a nickel fresher in terms of his shape when you get up on top. He's better at the top of his pole, at the crest of his neck. He's better in terms of his front pastures. Is a young lady there in the center. Really like the design of that bear. Ultra good. He stays really square coming and going. He's very shapely when you get up on top, and yet still very fresh in terms of his appearance. Very good in terms of the way that one hinges and goes. The more white, I guess the bear with more white on it out here, like this one in terms of his heaviness of structure. This one's bigger in terms of his rear leg. At the same time, he gets a little coarser in terms of his hock. He gets just a little drier there in terms of his center body. As I mentioned before, not quite as good there at the crest of his neck, not quite as good in terms of his pastern, but two awfully nice bears there in our Hereford class. The bear that comes in third, like this one in terms of his design and profile. As you get up on top of him, he gets more bland in terms of his shape. He gets drier and flatter in terms of his center body in relationship to the two that we had up ahead of him. He doesn't reach and go and flex quite as far off his rear two as what we had in the two that are up ahead of him, but another nice bear there in this class. Really shapely, attractive bear that comes next. I'd raise him up in terms of his front pastern, give him just a shot more bone in terms of his forearm, clean him up there in terms of his sheath just a bit to make him more competitive in this drive. Next one that comes out, like this one in terms of his shape when you get up on top, very square built, doesn't balance quite as well, not as extended out through that front end, not as good in terms of his freshness down his top in comparison to his contemporaries. Next one that comes out, really a fault-free good bear here, really good in terms of his design, just kind of runs out of gas in terms of shape and power in relationship to the ones that we had up ahead of him. Next one that comes out is more powerful at the same time. He gets just a little more upright in terms of his front shoulder, doesn't balance and hinge, doesn't relax his spine quite as well as the ones we had up above. Next one that comes out, really good in terms of his look. He too wants to get a little flatter in terms of his pastern, a little more restricted and shorter in terms of his stride up front. Next one that comes out, really a big, bulky, stout one, not quite as good up through that head and neck area. The next one that comes out, really a shapely one, just doesn't have quite as much stoutness from end to end or at the ground as what we had up above. Good class once again. Let's congratulate all our Hereford exhibitors.
Results out of your just completed. Class 1, Herefords first goes to Anna Lawrence, Indiana. Second, Cray Emmenheiser, Indiana. Third, Hattie Bannon, Indiana. Fourth, Allie Ayers, Indiana. And fifth, Peyton McCormick, Ohio. We are now ready to show our only class of Landrace Market Hogs.
check. It's an interesting pair. Just obviously they differ in type and kind, and as you sit back and ringside, I mean, you could say, hey, that guy's got different pigs out there, but they're the most quality show bearers in regards to maturity and where they're at, and fundamentally still being the most accurate in their step in that. And I think as you just step back and try to pick quality hogs, they put the most good together. And I don't defend that. I just want you to know in a pair that are different, I think you got to look in for a second, because I think really we want to say this is the bearer that's the stout, bold one, and this is the bearer that's flatter and doesn't have as much to him. But when you get out here in the big ring and you watch them come and you watch them go, you study forearm blade, toe width, real toe quality, and just how they open up in terms of their sternum and their pin bones. There's one that's more genuine there. He's not as fluffy backed, but he's more accurate in terms of his width from front to rear. And to me, it's because of that that allows him to win, because he's actually the bigger bladed one that opens up with more chest width and pin width and a better look yet too. And to me, that's in the young lady's black-headed barra. That's not to take away from this family or this kiddo, because this is a very well-presented show bearer that they have absolutely maxed out. I just want to see him more genuine in terms of his width as he goes to the ground and out of his pins, and he hits me just a shot in air coming at me, but he's just so hydrated and well presented on the top side of his skeleton and well driven, and he's not as long and as athletic in his step. That's where this pig ends up in third. We just need to see his angle and his shoulder set back, but that's a broad pin, muscular, big forearm, stout-headed, I think, bearer that reads right in terms of his weight and maturity, and I appreciate that. Just want to see him stay together better in terms of his build. This is one that hits you a little narrow coming at you, but that's a big-legged devil, big featured, lots of hair and muscle shape to his pin. This is a gilt that just hits me as a little too coarse, but you want to talk about making them out there and exotic. She sure does that. She, to me, just needs to go with more comfort in terms of her step, but really a bold pin, big forearmed one that's as big-legged as we've seen in the ring today. A gilt here that's just a little flatter, harsher, shallower, big forearm, good look, lots of shape. I think as you get into these barras and gilts that remain, they too still have good. They just don't have quite the skeletal build or genuine width to go ahead and move up. Let's give these kids a hand, please, on doing a good job.
In our Landrace division, the young man there, I guess more towards the out gate, is going to have our champion. I think one that's good in terms of the shape. This one really, you get up on top of him. He's bold in terms of his chest. Really carries that all the way up to his shape when you get up on top of him. Big hip, and handles it out here and comfortable in terms of the way he wants to get out here and go. A little smaller, quicker barra here that comes in second, and yet at the same time, this one's really bold as he comes at you. Big in terms of his shape when you get up on top. I thought he handled his rear leg just a bit better than maybe the barra that we've got here in third. I didn't know that he was quite as good there at the top of his neck in relationship to our class winner, but two very nice bears there in this particular drive. Next bear that comes out got just a little tighter on us. The longer we went, he gets just a little more upright in terms of his shoulder, a little tighter from behind, but there's one that's still very good in terms of his look, very good in terms of the shape when you get up on top. Like to give this one that comes out in fourth just a little bit more shape when you get up high. He gets just a little more bland. Like the extension, like the flex and reach this guy's got. Just need to give him a shot, more natural product. Really a good bear that's shapely when you get up on top. This one gets just a little more refined in terms of his feet and legs. Not quite as good in terms of his center body. Not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to to go off his rear two. I'd like to stout him there at the ground, give him just a little bigger foot. Next one that comes out gets a little softer there in terms of his spine. He too gets a little more refined in terms of his structure, not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to set up on his pasterns. Next one that comes out, like this one in terms of shape, he gets just a little more restricted. He wants to kind of stab and poke there with those rear two. I'd like to flex him and make him go just a bit better off his rear pastern, make him reach and go just a bit better off those rear two. Next one that comes out gets a little more jammed up and throaty out here, not quite as good in terms of his appearance and look from the side. Next one that comes out gets a little softer in terms of his makeup, not quite as good in terms of his side profile. Next one that comes out gets a little more restricted off of either end. Good class. Let's congratulate all our Landrace exhibitors once again with another nice round of applause.
Results out of our just completed Class 8 Crossbreds. First goes to Emil Lyons, Arkansas. Second, Harley Mabry, Arkansas. Third, Kane Cooper, Texas. Fourth, Isaac McClure, Georgia. And fifth, Kane Fulkenberry, Arkansas. We are now ready to show for our champion middleweight crossbred. Coming out of class number 5, congratulations, Isaac Tugg. Second in that class was Mason Scarborough. Beating them all in class number 6, congratulations, Macy Duncan. Second in that class was Ava Lynn Cravey. Capturing the blue ribbon in class number 7, congratulations, Carson Lynn. Second in that class was Brenna Dreyer. Out of our just completed class number 8, congratulations to Emil Lyons. Second in that class was Harley Mabry. Please put your hands together for these class winners as they show for champion middleweight crossbred.
Yeah, you parents should be proud of your kiddos. They do a really good job out here in this drive, and certainly a tough division. Lots of quality as you get them back out here, and I think as you just step back and analyze them skeletally, I really appreciate all these market hogs, and then you put quality and where you want to be at in terms of their look together, and then you go to trying to add to them. And for me, it's hard to make them balance, but yet make them athletic and still bold. You know, we can make them good looking, and we can make them really skeletally correct at the same time, but then to put true density in them, it's hard to do that. And there's one out here that combines those things the best. He does it to a high level. It's this one. Congratulations to you, and very good job.
Your champion middleweight crossbred comes out of class number 6. Congratulations, Macy Duncan. That drops in Ava Lynn Cravey for reserve honor. Results out of your Landrace division. First and champion goes to Matthew Perkins, Indiana. Second and reserve, Max Wagner, Indiana. Third, Carly Morris, Indiana. Fourth, Alex Steffi, Indiana. And fifth, Noel Peters, Indiana. We are now showing Class 1 Poland's.
Out here for reserve, you bring in our second in that class, and I thought that gilt was one that had a great deal of quality, and although I was solid on where I wanted to be in that group of them, that gilt hit me really well coming through, and I do think there's some decisions to be made in this particular group of them, but for this judge and where I want to be in regards to what I want them to represent in regards to their maturity and their shoulder and their crest, and yet still being in line in regards to muscle and balance from the side and just what I want to drape them to look like, there's one that just comes back to me and is the most in line. That will be the second out of that class. She'll be reserve in this division. Congratulations and good job. My compliments to all you exhibitors.
Your reserve middleweight comes out of class number 6, the second place, Ava Lynn Cravey.
Only 5 Polands here in this division, and yet I think the quality runs deep here. The bear that I'm going to use, the young lady there, as our class winner and champion. This one's very good in terms of the way this one hinges and goes. He's very good, and he's bold when he comes directly at you. He's a little deceiving off from the side, and when you get up on top of him, he's bigger in terms of his shape. He's bigger in terms of his hip. Love the way this one reaches and carries himself out through his hind leg. Extra good in terms of being shapely and fresh when you get up on top. I think a nice place to start. Like a lot of things about the young man's bear that's going to be reserved today, as we get him out here, he gets just a little higher in terms of his spine, a little shorter in terms of his stride, not quite as comfortable from behind. I didn't see him as being as wide from stifle to stifle as the bear that we had that wins and is champion, and yet very good in his own right. The big bear that comes here in third is one that you like in terms of height at the point of the shoulder, very good in terms of look. He's too big in terms of his forearm. I didn't see him as being quite as fresh there down his top, not quite as good there and fresh there from behind as you watch that one go directly away. Bear that comes out next gets a little more upright and more restricted there, gets a little tighter in terms of his spine, a little rounder out of his hip, not quite as good in terms of the way that one's muscles draped on him. Next one that comes out gets a little more uncoordinated out here, a little steeper and rounder out of his muscling there, out of his hip, like to strengthen him, raise his tail head just a bit. Good class. Let's congratulate all those kids with another nice round of applause.
Results out of your Poland division. First in champion, congratulations, Chloe Kemp. Second, Jeremiah Hamelman, Indiana. Third, Bank Sterling, Indiana. Fourth, Matthew Perkins, Indiana. And fifth, Rachel Rhodes, Indiana. We're now showing Class 1 Spotted Hogs. There is only one class of Spotted Hogs.
Starting off our last division here, and we're going to excuse just a few of these kiddos, but I want you to give them a big hand, please, as they go back to the back, and all these kids as we work through this last division. Thank you. It's a good class to see if you want to teach about maturity and where show bearers are living on the edge of still trying to dress them up to win a big major bear show, but yet not being too far over that. Where you're flirting with the line, you're getting into this window in this deal. And I'm not saying they're about right. I just mean they're hanging on to that last little bit at the finish line, and you get to break them down and see what the hogs really are. And then you got to ask yourself, for that weight, for that maturity, which one do you feel comfortable with in regards to, you know, being the best market hog. And that's just how I analyze them. I still get back out here and keep it big picture, and I ask myself which one hits you like an elite show bear when you walk up, and yet you break them down, and I think they carry down with a fuller rump, and they're deeper tying in their muscle pattern behind, they're square in their hock, and yet they look fresher and more hydrated in terms of their body wall. Their maturity is neater in terms of their crest and poll, and that's where I go ahead and favor the young lady's blue bear to win this particular class. The belted one in second is a harder muscled or harder backed hog that's got a very impressive shape to his foreloin. I don't read him, again, maybe quite as accurate there in terms of his rear third and his muscle and depth there to his hip and stifle pattern, and not quite as full there at his forerib and his heart. But I think that's a bigger chested bear, there's no doubt. He comes with a little more crest, but I think that's an extremely nice bear that if you could see him at the right time and maturity, I'm sure he was just an exceptionally good animal, and still good when you see his skeleton. The one here in third is one that he doesn't come at you as honest. He's not as neat in his front end. He hits me as a little coarse, but I love his forearm, his density, his coarseness of body texture, and just how massively big structured he is. To me, he hits me more as the boorish material in a class of show bears that lacks that look, as we discussed, up there on top of his neck and in his chest, but my compliments to him. I want to see this one square up and punch up with muscle. That's a mobile, comfortable, big-headed one. It's got big feet, extremely well presented. A bear that just runs out in terms of horsepower behind here. I think a bear that hits drier and staler, but's extended, level, and attractive. As you get into some of these others, they don't have quite the framework I'd like to put into them, or quite the muscle and freshness at this point in their maturity. Please help me in giving those kids a hand on doing a good job in this class, please.
Really good division here in our spotted ring, and probably one of the deeper sets in terms of a breed I think that we had today. And I kept sorting through, and I weighed probably more in this class than I did in any of the others. We had, I think, 23 head in one class, and so we had a big weight range. We had a big variance in terms of numbers. The one I kept coming back to out here for your champion is one that I think is really good in terms of look and silhouette from the side. Probably a little deceiving when she comes directly at you. She's as big-chested as she is. Very good in terms of length of front end. Very good in terms of freshness up high. Big-centered, one that handles her rear leg comfortably out here, reaches and goes. I think a nice place to start. She was bigger in terms of her heart and in terms of her flank, and bigger in terms of her bone and foot size than the bear that comes in too. And this is one that I really, really like in terms of his pattern, his silhouette that he paints out here. He's good at the top of his neck. He's good in terms of his reach and go. Very fundamental and sound when you get behind. And then you get up on top of him, and he's got more than enough. He's still big in terms of his center. A really nice bear there for second. The bear that comes in third, and this one's got some far-reaching pieces. He gets crustier up there at the top of his neck. He's not as good in terms of the way that one wants to get out here and go. I'd like to see him get another gear, and I'm not sure that he can in terms of what he's packing. He's big in terms of his hip. He gets just a little more uncoordinated, wants to throw those hind legs. He's real heavy-boned, and yet of our top three, he's the narrowest between his dew claws as you study that one going directly away. But a very nice, interesting pig there in third. Bear that comes in fourth. This one's good in terms of his center body. This one kind of got a little cantankerous out here. He gets a little more jammed up front. Not quite as good in terms of his flex off his rear tooth. Not quite as good in terms of his length and extension up through his front end. But a good fresh bear that's good in terms of his top shape, good in terms of his hip. Next one that comes out gets a little smaller in terms of her cannon. I worry about this one in terms of her maturity, just a little quicker, a little rounder, not quite as good in terms of her length of hip, not quite as good in terms of her depth of heart in this particular drive. The next one that comes out has a bit more set there to her rear leg, not quite as good in terms of his look out through the front end, but another one too, still gets out and goes, stays mobile, still has plenty of width and power coming directly at you. This one, when he first came out, I thought this is one that was going to get weighed. The longer we drove, he gets just a little tighter in terms of his spine. Doesn't open with quite as much center body as what we had up above, but a good design bear off from the side. Next one that comes out gets a little staler in terms of his makeup, not quite as heavy duty in terms of his running gear out here. Next one that comes out gets a little more restricted, like the freshness this one's got, just not quite as good at coming and going. Next one that comes out gets a little tighter from behind the longer we drove. Good class, good division of spots. Let's congratulate all those exhibitors.
Results out of Class 9 Crossbreds. First goes to Millie Kate Foster, Arkansas. Second, Chloe Kemp, Oklahoma. Third, Colton Kilmer, Indiana. Fourth, Braden Lancaster, Kentucky. And fifth, Kenley Crone, Texas. We're now showing Class 10 Crossbreds. Results out of your Class 1 spots and only class of spotted market hogs. First in Champion, Camden Platt, Indiana. Second, Chase Farr, Indiana. Third, Hudson Brown, Indiana. Fourth, Luke Cathy, Arkansas. And fifth, Quentin Lyons, Arkansas. We're now showing Class 1 in the only class of Tamworth.
please help me one more time in giving these kids a round of applause as they go back to the back, please, on doing a good job. Thank you.
Our Tamworth ring, the young man on the far side's got our champion. I think this one, in terms of bone and foot size and power, kind of overwhelms the class. Really stout in terms of his look, good in terms of his build, and gets out and goes really comfortable. And then when you get up on top of him, you kind of get really impressed in terms of his shape and his power. From the brim of his nose all the way to the root of his tail. I think a nice place to start. Young lady here to my left is going to be second in reserve, and I think this one's very good in terms of look up through his front end, very good in terms of height at the point of the shoulder. He's not quite as heavy duty at the ground as what our champion was. He's not as busted open through the center portion of his body quite as well as what we had in our eventual champion, but another very nice Tamworth bear for the young lady. Third is going to be another one like the design this guy's got off from the side. When you get up on top of him, he kind of runs out of gas in terms of shape and power and dimension. I'd like to open him up from end to end, give him a nickel fresher back shape when you get up on top of him to make him compete with those top two. Next one that comes out gets a little more refined in terms of his foot size and his bone, not quite as big in terms of his center body. Gets a little flatter in terms of his stifle, a little flatter in terms of his shoulder in this particular drive. Next one that comes out, a little more uncoordinated from behind, not quite as wide in terms of the way that one wants to track and go as if you him going directly away. Good class of Tams. Let's congratulate all those exhibitors.
Results out of your Tamworth division. First in champion, Everett Johnson, Indiana. Second in reserve, Cameron Friend, Indiana. Third, Haley Dannenberg, Illinois. Fourth, Kendall Clevinger, Indiana. And fifth, Hayden Chickadance, Indiana.
really good pair here and good class on the top end of these 4 or 5. To me, there's one that just goes to the ground square and is stouter featured, but still does it with the same boldness of body and spread as the other. To me, that's the young man's bear here to my right. One that still uniquely runs uphill on top of that as well. The one that's going to be second's young man's Gilt here, and she's not as square there right in her hock, but I think she's one that does read extremely good in terms of her comfort level, her balance, her proportions. Again, not maybe quite as stout up there in her jaw and not quite as extended off her front end, even as that Barra, but I think just one that is extremely good as well, just like the square and sure up there going away ever so slightly in her hock. The one there in third, I'd like to put a stouter head on her, but I think, or more just jaw particularly, but out there at the brim of his nose. But I still think a comfortable built Barra that reads good in terms of his pin set. I want to see him open up more genuine and at the ground coming at me. Wants to get a little tentative there at times, but really well presented. It's a stout, really broad, big rib market hog. I would like to neaten him up there in his front end and just seem a little more immature, but I think one that's so comfortable and just really good livestock. Next one here is just shorter reaching off his back end for me. Front 2/3 are where I want to be. A little longer bodied, a little flatter in his general look to me from the side, but just want to see that go with more comfort off his hind leg and reach. This is one that's really good that way. She's not as genuine and opened up as some of them Barras are up the line, but I think really a stout-headed, loose-built one that's not presented quite as well. A Barra here that I'd like to punch a little in muscle, real correct in his build and loose in his make and balanced in his look. I think as you get into some of these others, they still offer some quality. Just would like to see them a little more in line at this point in this weight. Please help me give these kids a hand on doing a good job. Thank you.
Results out of your just completed Class 10 Crossbreds. First, from Oklahoma, Gavin Straka. Second, Carson Kilmer, Indiana. Third, Mallory Yoki, Missouri. Fourth, Brody Taylor, Arkansas. Fifth, Gavin Young, Indiana.
Another good class here in our first class of Yorkshires, and I think there's one that comes to the top and does so fairly easily, in my opinion. Is very good in terms of build, and yet still very good in terms of look. Got enough jaw and stoutness through its skull, and yet still opens up extremely well out of the backside of his shoulder, maintains a comfort level out of his hip and hind leg. Young lady closest to me's got our class winner, I think does so fairly handily in this class. I thought it got closer, in my opinion, for second and third, and I guess the differences between the two is the young man's barra here is one that maybe not quite as shapely right out of the back of his shoulder, and yet still maintains levelness. He's bigger in terms of his forearm. He's better in terms of his range of motion and his length of hip and the way that one flexes and goes out of his rear too. I think it's extremely good in this class. The young lady's barra here gets a little more refined in terms of his jaw, not quite as big in terms of his forearm, not quite as good in terms of his length of hip or his stride or reach out from behind. But that's two very nice barras, just lots of differences between those. I place priority in terms of hip and hind leg and the way they can reach and go. I think that's what sorted those two, in my opinion. Really stout, fresh top barra that comes out next, and I like those things about him. As you view him from the side, he gets a little crustier there right at the top of his neck. He gets just a little more restricted and rounder out of his hip. I need to make him go just with more reach and go out here on the shavings today to make him go any higher. Next one that comes out does have more reach and flex. At the same time, gets a little softer in terms of his spine, not quite as elegant up through that front end, not quite as big in terms of his hip, not quite as powerful out of the back of his blade as what we had up above. Next one that comes out, really a neat look up through that front end. At the same time, gets a little more upright in terms of his shoulder, gets a little straighter in terms of his hock, doesn't want to plant and drive with that angle. You can see he just gets just a little posterior there in terms of his hock, not quite as comfortable there. Next one that comes out is another one you like in terms of shape and design off from the side. At the same time, Sheeny gets a little narrower there when they come right directly at you. Gets a little more upright in terms of his shoulder. Not quite as good in terms of comfort level out here. Not as expansive there in terms of center body. Next one that comes out gets a little more upright in terms of shoulder. Not quite as comfortable out here on the move. A little more restricted in terms of his look. Not quite as good in terms of his roundness of his muscle, the way it wants to tie on there in his hip. It gets just a little rounder and bunchier there. As we round the class out, we've got some that get just a little tighter, more restricted, not quite as good in terms of the way they want to handle their feet and legs today. Good class. Let's once again congratulate all those kids with another nice round of applause.
Results out of Class 1, Yorkshire's first goes to Bailey Perkins, Indiana. Second goes to Alexis Misenek, Indiana. Third, Maley Sweers, Michigan. Fourth, Colton Ebinger, Indiana. And fifth, Alexis Misnek, Indiana. We're now showing Class 2, Yorkshire's.
Young ladies, Calico is going to win this class, and the bear that puts the most good together in terms of being balanced and heavy duty and his look, still adequate in his muscle shape, and still doesn't look like he's got as much age to him as you get him back out here amongst these others. To me, in comparison to the bear in second, he particularly is better up there on the top side of his neck and just in terms of his head, and he's a little square, leaving you. Young man's bear on the far side is going to be second there, and one that if you want to step ringside and look at one that's got an impressive shape to the top side of him, that guy does. His loin is big. He's a comfortable built bear, really broad in terms of his chest. Again, he isn't maybe ideal right there in his pinch and up in his front end, but that's extremely good show bear. The one here in third is driven so good in terms of athleticism. He's a high-cut, lean-looking thing that's mobile and got an athletic look. I don't read him as heavy-duty and as dense and as thorough in his bone and just density as those above him, but I still think that's a very good show bearer. The one that's in fourth is one that's not as neat up there on the top side of his neck. He's one that's extremely muscular and square built, though I can appreciate what he represents. This is a bear here that even though he's got that going on in his flank, this is still an attractive show bearer. Good necked. His crest for this class is awesome. Even though we need to neaten him up in his bottom line and give him a shot more, that's still a high quality market hog. This is a bear here that you'd like to just see a little neater and a little sharper. He's opened up, big forearms, stout-headed and broad. As you get into 7, 8, 9, and 10 here, they're hogs that are just a little past their end point. They've got quality to them, though. Please help me in giving all these kids and those that were excused that we didn't get to give a round of applause for a big round of applause, please, in this class.
Results out of our just completed Class 11 Heavyweight Division Crossbred class. First goes to Chloe Kemp, Oklahoma. Second, Braden Lancaster, Kentucky. Third, Gavin Straka, Oklahoma. Fourth, Ava Lynn Cravey, Georgia. And fifth, Mackenzie Dye, Wisconsin. We're now showing Class 12 Crossbreds.
Good class, and as we round out our Yorkshire show, and lots of different parts and pieces, and there's things that I really like about each and every one of these. One I kept coming back to, the one that's the most basic. No, he's not painted, and that really doesn't matter to me. That you can't change feet and legs with paint, and yet still very good in terms of the way this one gets out and goes. He's big in terms of his blade, big in terms of his forearm, extra good in terms of his squareness. I think he's squarer and truer there from the way he picks his rear leg up, travels forward, grabs the surface, and then drives that back than our gilt that we've got in second. Like the extra stoutness that the gilt has in two, and yet at the same time gets just a little crustier there at the top of her neck, not quite as good in terms of her look out through her front end. As you view that one going directly away, she wants to kind of circle and roll and do some S's and O's back there instead of plant and drive straight forward. But there's a big stout gilt that's really good in terms of shape and power, and yet still maintaining a comfort level. The bearer that comes in third, love the design. If we were going to set one out here, take him a still photo like they do in cattle, this would probably be the one that would win the class. As we get him in motion, he gets just tighter up front, more restricted. I'd set him back in terms of his shoulder. As you view him going directly away, he wants to kind of plant, roll, and step outside himself about every third or fourth step. I'd square him up there, make him go just a bit better in relationship to the ones that we had up above. But love the silhouette, love the design that one's got. The next one that comes, really a big fresh back, and this one's extremely square. As you view him going, he's not as neat up through his head and his neck. He's not as good in terms of his pastern level. He's not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to hinge and go. Gets a little shorter in terms of his hip in comparison to a couple that we had up above. Next one that comes out gets flatter in terms of his cage, gets tighter in terms of his flank, not quite as good in terms of the way that one wants to hinge and go, gets a little straighter up through his shoulder and front knee in relationship to the ones we had up above. Next one that comes out gets a little plainer from nose to tail all the way through. He too gets rounder and steeper in terms of his hip. Next one that comes out, really stout, powerful one. You like those things about him. As you get him out here, he gets restricted from behind. He gets a little tighter there, never takes his hock back past his tailhead in any of his steps. Next one that comes out, a little plainer in terms of makeup, a little maybe further past due in terms of freshness, not quite as good in terms of head and neck set. Next one that comes out, not as heavy duty in terms of power and bone, gets a little softer in terms of their spine, not quite as good in terms of at the ground. We round the class out with a couple that get a little plainer in terms of shape, not quite as good in terms of power and dimension. Good class as we round out our Yorkshire show. Let's once again give all those kids another real nice round of applause.
Results out of Class 2, Yorkshires. First goes to Maddox Thompson, Indiana. Second, Deegan Sheldon, Indiana. Third, Lauren Myers, Michigan. Fourth, Arlie Shea Fulcher, North Carolina. And fifth, Luke Coles, Indiana. We are now ready to show for champion Yorkshire Market Hog. Coming out of class number 1, congratulations to Bailey Perkins, Indiana. Second in that class was Alexis Mesnick, Indiana. Coming out of class number 2, congratulations Maddox Thompson, Indiana. Second in that class was Deegan Sheldon. Please put your hands together for those exhibitors as they drive for champion Yorkshire at the 2023 North American.
As we finish our purebred show here, we've got our first and second out of our two respective Yorkshire classes. Very happy with the ones we've got out here, and yet I think there's one that in terms of just genuine build and look and stoutness and really good in terms of the way this one's put together, the way he balances, the way he carries himself. Maybe not quite as good in terms of skin and hair as some of the others, but that doesn't take away where his positives are. Young man out of that heavyweight class is going to have your champion.
Your champion Yorkshire Barrel comes out of class number 2. Congratulations to Maddox Thompson. That drops in Deegan Sheldon for reserve honors.
So we bring our second place in. We talked about her, maybe a little crustier there at the top of her neck, maybe not quite as neat up through that head and neck, and yet still very powerful. A little rounder out of her hip. We've got our lightweight Barra here that really good in terms of silhouette from the side, ultra good in terms of look and design off from the picture that one paints as it goes across the ring. I like him second best. He'll be reserved.
Your reserve champion Yorkshire comes out of class number 1. Congratulations from Indiana, Bailey Perkins.
Although a little different speeds in terms of kind, there's still the robust, more muscular Barras that are fresh and well presented, and you wouldn't know the weight of these things. I mean, they actually look better even than some of them other classes we've been in, just in terms of freshness and body and still looking full. And I think as you study them, to me, there's one that just hits you as a broader, stouter, more uniquely made individual that you gravitate to. And for me, that's the young lady here closer to me. That's the bigger forearmed, just more uniquely constructed hog in terms of his density, but still being sharp. And although moderate in his length of body, he, to me, still balances better than the Barra in second. The Barra in second is looser built off his left hind, and I like that in comparison to our class winner. I don't think, though, in that particular pair, he's got enough woof to go ahead and beat that winner in terms of just extra density, manliness, and boldness. But I think really a good show bearer that does not lack in that. He just doesn't bring that in this particular class to beat the one that's here. The one here in third is one that is extremely good in terms of just being a proportional, muscular market hog that's high quality. His neck doesn't set quite as high there at the top of his shoulder. I think you take that into consideration with his lack of chest and rib. He falls down the line a little quicker, but that's a big square hind leg, very well shown, very well presented. A Barra here I'd like to neaten up in his front end and maturity, but I think one that has certainly got a good hind leg, a well shown Barra that's well presented, is comfortable. He's not as exotic in his shape and just his look up front as we discussed. I'd like to modify this pig in his front foot and how his shoulder shaped and how he comes at the ground on them feet. But that Barra's back and presentation, that boy does a great job showing pigs. He comes in, he's watching me as the show judge for his pen, and I think with you guys with little kids, you need to watch that boy. He's coming in and paying attention to make sure he gets his spot over here in the holding pens, and that's something that's very important. I think a barra here that's not as heavy structured and as big forearm as those belted barras in front of him, not quite as neat up there on the top of his pole and big in his chest, but a good rear-ended, hind-legged, muscular market hog that's well presented. I think a barra here that doesn't have as much to him going away in his pen and his muscle, but I think as you get into some of these others, they're high-quality, big-legged, good-looking market hogs that just need a shot more. Let's give them a hand, please, on doing a good job.
We are now ready to show for champion heavyweight crossbred. Coming out of class number 9, congratulations, Millie Kate Foster. Second in that class was Chloe Kemp. Out of class number 10, congratulations, Gavin Straka. Second in that class was Carson Kilmer. Coming out of class number 11, congratulations, Chloe Kemp. Second in that class was Braden Lancaster. Out of your just completed class number 12, congratulations to Ashley Hagan. Second in that class was Madison Scarborough. Please put your hands together for these 4 individuals as they drive for champion heavyweight crossbred.
We've had a really good division here at the end, and as you study them, I just think out loud. There's some hogs in here that vary in their size and their moderation and their frame and where they're at in their maturity, but yet I think they all still fit and they don't look too far. They look good and proper for where they are. They're muscular, they're stout, and as you get back out here and you study them, there's one that just hits me good. I mean, manly, broad, big-ribbed, bold, heavy-duty, but yet balanced, attractive, got extension, and those things I gravitate to, especially when we get to these weights. I want them to be men when they get here. I don't want to have to say, I wish this thing had a little more, and you run into that in some of these, and with all that being said, I like this one. Congratulations to you.
Your champion heavyweight comes out of class number 10. Congratulations, Gavin Straka. That drops in Carson Kilmer for reserve honors.
think out here for your reserve in this division, all 4 of them still, I think, are worth, noting that they do have quality and there's some consideration to be made in them. We didn't really pick on these things as we judged them in those classes, and to be honest with you, I think these 2 barrows on this side I'd like to improve a little going away in terms of their reach and their step. I love their shortness of side and look in terms of their proportions, but still have an extension ahead of their shoulder. And I think these 2 vary a little bit in terms of this one's front foot could be improved and be a shot bolder. This one's hind leg could be a shot square, but is so bold and still yet really attractive and balanced. That's how I see them. I see variance skeletally in all of them, but I still think they're all really high quality. For me, the one I like second best is this young man's Gilt. He'll be second overall in this division. Congratulations.
Your reserve heavyweight comes out of class number 10, the second place, Carson Kilmer from Indiana. We are now ready to show for champion Crossbred. Out of the lightweight division, congratulations to Landon Schwartzentruber. Second in that division or reserve was Rhett Turner. Out of your middleweight division, congratulations to Macy Duncan. Reserve in that division was Ava Lynn Cravey. And out of your just completed heavyweight division, congratulations to Gavin Straka. Reserve in that division was Carson Kilmer. Please put your hands together for these exhibitors as they drive for champion Crossbred Market Hog at the 2023 North American.
Been a really good crossbred show, and a ton of quality in it up here on the top end, and I've enjoyed having the opportunity to judge them today for you. I think for me, there is a pair of them that are more similar in their muscle composition and where they mark up at in regards to their tone and their look and their just their overall muscle patterns. And of those, I come back to them and you break them down, you watch them come and you watch them go, and still yet I go back to that first impression and just the one you like. For me, there's one that does that, and that to me is this one over here to my right. He's going to be your champion out of this crossbred deal. Congratulations.
Your champion crossbred comes out of the middleweight division. Congratulations, Macy Duncan. That drops in Ava Lynn Cravey for reserve honors.
We bring our second in out of there, and that gilt had a ton of quality in that division, and there's been some really good gilts in this deal today, and you still step back and judge them as market hogs, and I don't think she gives up anything there. Is she as neat maybe in how she ties in the top of her blade and maybe her head shape? Is she as broad as some? I don't think so, but I think as an individual, you still have to really appreciate her quality and how she's put together. I love the athleticism and the build and the bone of the little guy out here. He isn't as draped with as much muscle and punch to him, and doesn't have as much in his britches either. He's lighter weight. So I think you got to still consider him acceptable in some of those places where he's still showing some. To me, as you study the big one, it's hard to make them still balance and read appropriate in their lines when they get to that weight. And I think that bear does it with some extremes when you get up into his rib and study him down his top line and still get back off to the side and watch how that hog still truly runs uphill. He's got a great big broad chest and heart working in him. I love his manliness. He'll be second best. Congratulations to these exhibitors in the Crossbred show.
Your reserve crossbred comes out of the heavyweight division. Congratulations, Gavin Straka.